Welcome everyone to this auditorium debate on bridging the digital divide, managing digitalization and technology for inclusive growth. I hope you all have had a wonderful day at the EDD and you have had your afternoon coffee in order to participate very actively in this auditorium debate, where we will indeed be soliciting your input, your ideas, your creativity to engage in conversation about digital transformation and sustainable development. My name is Sasha RUBEL and I am Program Specialist at UNESCO, coordinating our work on digital transformation and artificial intelligence. And it's a pleasure to be with you here today after the launch of the Digital Economy Task Force in Vienna in December at the EU-Africa High-Level Forum, Taking Cooperation to the Digital Age. The production of this report in such a short time, the Digital Economy Task Force was launched in just December 2019, is emblematic not only of the federating force and efficiency of this multi-stakeholder approach, but also of the commitment of all of the members of the task force. And we're very happy to have many of the members of the task force, brilliant minds, friends, and shakers in the EU and in Africa, here with us today to talk about the process of this report. The objectives of this panel discussion today are first and foremost to discuss how digital technologies are an essential element to meet the UN SDGs by 2030 and fight inequalities in the developing world. Secondly, we hope that this panel will highlight the important work of the EU-AU Digital Economy Task Force and the report that was just recently adopted on 13th of June. It's here and it's for free online. If you haven't downloaded it, please do. It is a marvelous piece of cooperative work. If you see some of the lines underneath the eyes of some of the members of the Digital Economy Task Force, I think it's because they have spent many sleepless nights working on this to make sure that the recommendations are not only concrete, but also represent a way forward for cooperation between the EU and the AU in this important field. And thirdly, the objective of this panel is to discuss ways to address the digital divide through the development of inclusive policy agendas and actions. In the next hour and a half that we'll be spending together, we will look, after the introduction by both Commissioner GABRIEL and Commissioner ABOU-ZEID, who I will have the pleasure of presenting momentarily, we will look specifically at these three objectives through interactive conversation with the audience. It is important for us that this auditorium debate reflects the multi-stakeholder approach in which the Digital Economy Task Force occurred, and so we encourage all of you to participate very actively in the sections that we will have, that will be an opportunity for you to ask questions to the panel members and engage in conversation. I'd like first and foremost to introduce our esteemed panelists here with us today. First, Ms. Mariya GABRIEL, Member of the European Commission, Dr. Amani ABOU-ZEID, Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy from the African Union Commission, Ms. Claudette IRERE, who is the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of ICT of Rwanda, Mr. Pierre GUISLAIN, in his home country of Belgium, Vice President of the African Development Bank, Mr. John Paul Hemingway, CEO of SES Networks, Mr. Hisham Al-Arab, Chairman and Managing Director of the Commercial International Bank in Egypt, Her Royal Highness Princess Abze Djigma, Chair of the Abze Djigma Foundation of Burkina-Faso, and Ms. Inès Tatiana HOUNDJO from Benin, who is one of our EDD young leaders, and we are very pleased to have her here with us today because it would be impossible to leave out the voice of youth in thinking about ways forward of enacting transformation, and particularly digital transformation on the African continent. I would just like to underline very quickly, before passing the floor to Commissioner GABRIEL, that on this panel we have 5 women and 3 men, which is a particular pleasure for me to moderate today. And I think this is representative not only of the commitment of the Commission to promoting gender equality, both in policy and also in action, but also representative of the important role that women are playing in the EU and also in Africa in ensuring digital transformation and leading that transformation. So thank you for being here with us today, and thank you for the he for she champions who are here with us today also supporting this gender equality. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to pass the floor to Commissioner GABRIEL, European Commissioner for Digital Economy and Society, to note specifically on the challenges and actions identified by the EU-AU Digital Economy Task Force and the 4 pillars that will be the roadmap forward for cooperation in this field for the coming years. Commissioner GABRIEL, please.
Merci beaucoup, Sasha.
Thank you. Thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, ministers. Firstly, what an honor and a pleasure to be amongst such people on the panel. It's a subject which is really at the heart of digital transformation, Africa, Europe, that we're experiencing. I think it's the best place for inclusivity to be at the heart of our discussions. So I'd really like to thank everybody for having put this at the heart of the panel, but also to invite everybody to share the ideas and comments. I'm also very pleased to be amongst members of the task force for Digital Europe and Africa. It's been working for 6 months incessantly on this topic. I'd like to thank everyone because it really shows how much conviction, how much digital transformation can really create the potential. It's a first message. If we want to have greater inclusivity, we need also to change some of our working methods, accelerate and not just carry on down certain routes which we've been doing for decades, where women and people in rural communities need to be involved. So in 6 months, they've produced a report, the quality of which you will all see, which is one which identifies 4 pillars of connectivity and digital so digital services, and particularly the recommendations, specific recommendations it produced. So the question we all have to ask is how we can turn digital into inclusivity. So we need to mobilize everybody. It's no longer enough for it to be just the institutions and civil society or the private sector. Today, we need to work right from the ground level through up to international level to mobilize, to get this digital transformation to be something positive for everybody. And particularly because the question of inclusivity is not just sustainable development and social justice. It's a powerful engine for security, peace and development. So I would also like for us to change the angle we're looking at, to bring everybody in to work together with them to promote common values, to have development which benefits everybody, both locally, regional, nationally and internationally. And these are the key issues. How we can improve access. I think that this is one of the key questions, because undeniably digital divide exists and we shouldn't close our eyes to this digital transformation, which can bring lots of benefits in terms of goods and services, but it can also make worse the existing divisions. So it's a real risk of greater poverty and social exclusion, marginalization of regions, communities and countries. And the signs are already there. So it's up to us to seize these challenges and opportunities. And so I think it's access to digital skills and services. It's not just a case of showing it's something that provides benefits, but if we don't have people who are able to benefit from it. So I think priority number one needs to be digital skills and access to those skills. There are very specific examples. In Europe, we have the European Code Week, which focuses on almost 2 million participants. And we want to get 50% of the schools in Europe involved in this initiative by next year. Firstly, it was 10%, which we got to in 2008, and moved up to 15% now. And you see this in the report and in follow-up. We've created a coalition for employment and digital skills, involved various national coalitions, and the aim was ambitious. It was to train 1 million citizens. In one year, they've done more than 11 million. So it shows the extent to which this type of platform can yield results. I'd also like to highlight women, access of women to digital skills. We all know incredible women. What's important today is to be able to support them so that the networks can work further. And these women can show us what new technologies, AI, blockchain, they're there to help their communities, but also their own development. If a woman develops it, a family and then a village develops and blossoms. I think we need to think particularly about rural areas. The divides are there, even in Europe. Lots of areas don't have sufficient digital connectivity, particularly in the rural areas. So we need to do something more. And there, the new technologies really offer us a great opportunity to reduce the barriers. So, bearing this in mind, I'd like to share the experiences that we've been going through. I'm very happy that the Commission has really put the digital at the heart of our partnership with Africa. You'll remember 2 years ago, we created the Alliance for Sustainable Development and Investment. And what's happened is that there's been a change of ideas and approach. And we've been able to create a message, more private investment, but by and for Africans. I think it's a question of respect and a real partnership, which is not donors, beneficiaries, but a partnership of equals with respect for one another. And that's why I'm very concerned not just to look for another partner to repeat the European examples. I want to support them in their own initiative. They have excellent ideas. I'm sure we're going to hear lots of them, and I think we need to follow them. And to give another sense to the word, another meaning to the word cooperation, I think that the discussions will contribute to this. The task force is part of this alliance, and I'll come back to this because it has done an incredible amount of work. I'd like to highlight one point in particular. 6 months of intensive work. Report finished. Quality there. Sublime. Now we need the follow-up. And that's always what I'm concerned with. We have all the great ambitions and the start, but I want to see the follow-up and the implementation. And that's why I'm really wanting to invite everybody, particularly the people in the room, to put forward ideas. We've got the 4 pillars, but in each of these pillars, there'll be a couple of priorities which are realistic, based on finance, partnership with a private partnership, civil society, but to highlight the ideas and initiatives that make a difference. And I think in this potential, in this report and the follow-up, we're all able to promote initiatives which will create change and allow everybody to see digital as something inclusive. A very specific example, something we did in Europe, is a Wi-Fi for EU initiative. 50,000 euros for communities that are up to 8,000. They have 3 years to create free access to internet in public spaces. And now, it's important for hospitals, football stadiums, sports stadiums. So you don't need much of a budget for this. But what we've seen is this feeling that it's not us who go to the Commission site or the African Union to find the information, but these institutions come to us, and together we can make changes. So it's this type of initiative that I want to see to promote inclusivity, so that it's not just legislation or regulatory framework, but it's the energy and the dynamism that people on the ground are able to contribute. I've been inspired throughout life by Africa, but I do want to assure them that they have my firm support. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Gabriel. You incarnate in many ways the commitment and the important role that women are playing in digital transformation. So thank you very much for the work that you do in promoting this work, not only in the European Union, but also across the African continent. It is my pleasure now to pass the floor to Dr. Amani ABOU-ZEID, Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy at the African Union Commission.
Merci, Natasha. Bonjour tout le monde. Excellence, Monsieur le représentant du Président de l'Union africaine.
I'm representing the President of the African Union here. And Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, first of all, I'd like to say that I want to pay tribute to the members of the task force. They were an extraordinary group from Europe and from Africa, with representatives of practically all sectors. And as the Commissioner has just said, they've done an outstanding job and produced a report which is realistic, feasible, relevant, and, as has just been said, of extraordinary quality. And so I'd like you to join me in a round of applause for that fantastic team. My contribution this evening is going to be based on the situation in Africa, because it's important to change the narrative and particularly change the way we talk about Africa, particularly when we're talking about digitalization or the 4.0 revolution. The digital sector is shown itself to be an accelerator of growth in Africa. It's not a promise for a distant future. In fact, it's becoming apparent today. It's showing that it can be crucial to the success of other activities. The fact that Africa has fallen behind means that we can sometimes leapfrog certain stages and get in on the ground floor. And that's the beauty of digitalization for Africa, because it means that we can leapfrog and, in fact, not just leapfrog, but become like a puma as we gain speed. And so I think that it can ensure access to services like health and education. That, of course, requires investment and steering and accompaniment, but the idea and the ambition of sustainable investment in terms of the GDP and in public and private investment, you can't think of that without thinking of the infrastructure and the need to tap the opportunities offered by the digital sector. The digital development has enabled Africa to move faster, favouring agility, innovation, entrepreneurship across all sectors of the economy, agriculture, industry, services, and so on. People have been talking here about inclusion. You must realize that half of the population of Africa is aged under 20. That new generation is good at new technology and prepared to make the financial trade-offs in order to get digital services and take ownership of them and integrate them in new innovative services. And that is a strong feature favoring the development of new digital businesses. We're prepared to ensure that young people, therefore, have a privileged place in our policy design and in all our activities. In Africa, most of the population is still living in rural communities, which raises the crucial question of cover for those areas, still incomplete. Nonetheless, there is a trend towards urbanization with a largely urban population projected around 2035. But urbanization, the very rapid urbanization of Africa, means that we've got to construct connected and sustainable cities, incorporating the latest technologies. This represents an opportunity for smart infrastructure and smart cities applications, particularly in energy and transport. For that to happen, our ministers for infrastructure and for energy met very recently in Cairo in April. And now, in all the action plans, the African Union has asked that all projects are smart and that all the infrastructure projects underway in Africa become smart projects with intelligent infrastructure. The middle classes account for 14% of the African population. It's a young, urbanized, educated population with the financial means and an appetite for new digital tools like smartphones. So that represents a significant market for digital innovative services. I'm saying this in order to show what opportunities there are on our continent and what role young people can play. In Africa, the digital ecosystem is flourishing. Look at the funds devoted to startups. From 2016 to 2017, it rose from 53% to $530-some million. The economy is still basically startups, but more and more accelerators. We now have more than 400 startups in Africa now in this sector. This is the kind of thing you should talk about when you talk about the African continent. We also have more and more sophisticated financial services, from mobile payments to mobile credit and savings systems. This is important because only 10% of the African population has actually got a bank account. So this is a huge opportunity for the financial inclusion of the entire African population. Another area where the digital can come in is energy, the digitalization of our networks, because we've got an energy deficit on our continent. Startups and the pay-as-you-go systems show us already likely business models that can also provide access to energy, which people didn't have before. I could talk about incentives like this in all sectors, but it's important to talk about them because it shows that on the African continent we already have platforms which enable us to use digital applications in agriculture, in health, or even in the rollout and delivery of services for all. And that is the strength and the beauty of digitalization. In Africa, sometimes people tend to talk about the absence of a silver lining, but here we have opportunities we didn't think existed. The digital sector will enable us to move further, faster. We're not just talking about the divide between the rural and urban sectors either, or the divide between men and women. We must recognize that we have countries where we have liberal go-ahead policies, but we also have enclaves where we need to ensure that all African countries become connected. I've talked about the urban-rural divide, I've talked about young people, but I need to get the point across that, as the Commissioner just said, we need to think about this in such a way that the entire population is connected and has the means in terms of skills and digital education to access services. We're now developing the program for the digital ID cards, and we're working on physical connectivity, the physical infrastructure, and we're working with our partners, Europe first and foremost, on the different projects that we need to raise awareness of, so that everybody is aware of these new technologies and what their significance can be. And I think in the different countries, in the country strategies, you will find that digitalization is moving fast up the agenda, and up the agendas of decision makers too. So I think that the real thing to remember is this is not a handicap, it's an opportunity for Africa. It's a continent where things are moving, where things are leaping forward. And I think that all across the news now you'll be reading about the African free movement and freedom of exchange area, which is going to be huge. And I think that this too is going to provide further incentive for, but a further opportunity too, for digitalization. We need to move forward. Given the wonderful work done by the task force with representatives of business, the institutions, civil society, we now need to make sure that this bears concrete fruit within a feasible timeline. And I can reassure the Commissioner, because in the group we've already started thinking about this, but also with representatives of different institutions and also with representatives of some governments who are present here. And I very much hope that by the end of this year we will have firm commitments from our governments based on the recommendations of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner ABOU-ZEID, first and foremost for all the work that you're doing on the ground to implement Agenda 2063 of the African Union, which recognizes very clearly the role of digital economy and digital transformation in the sustainable development and transformation of the continent, but also for very clearly underlining the incredible innovation coming out of the continent, out of necessity, in fields such as fintech, that can really be not only scaled across the continent, but also in the European Union. And we're very happy to have with us Mrs. IRERE from Rwanda here today, who I'm sure we will hear from later, as it concerns good practices coming out of the African continent that could inform policies and programs across Africa, but also in the European Union, which exactly in this way changes what Commissioner GABRIEL underlined as it concerns how we think about cooperation and development. So thank you for those introductory remarks. Very briefly, to start off on our participatory section of this auditorium debate, I hope you're sitting next to people that you don't necessarily know, and I would like to take 1 minute while the room dégage this podium. If you could please stand up and say hi to your neighbor, and in 1 minute or less, exchange about how you think digital technologies are essential to reducing inequalities and meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm timing you. You have 60 seconds. Say hi and be nice.
We too? Oui, bah oui. You do this. Yeah. So.
Hi.
Is that
Hi.
no.
Hello. Hi. Hi.
I'm so happy to see. So please get back to your seats. I hope this is the beginning of a conversation that you'll be able to continue over coffee or a drink after this auditorium debate. Please take your seats. I'm happy to see that this is very engaging conversation. It means that this is a very passionate topic for all of you, and we hope that some of the conversations that will occur in the coming hour still that we have together will reflect some of the items that came up. I'd just like to underline that in framing this first part of our debate, that the digital economy in Africa, as Commissioner ABOU-ZEID underlined, provides not only opportunities for increased job creation. Often when we talk about digital economy, we go to numbers, right? We say, okay, well, concretely, how many jobs for youth in Africa, which is a very important demographic, will investing in the digital economy create? But it is also the basis for recognizing human rights, accelerating access to quality basic services, improving transparency and accountability of governments, and enhancing democracy. So it goes beyond the numbers. And again, I'd like to recognize the great work of the Digital Economy Task Force, not only in demonstrating very concretely, let's say, return on investments in investing in the digital economy, but also return on investments in a qualitative way as it concerns the quality of life for young people on the continent. And again, as the two commissioners both rightfully underlined, not only talking about the divides between rural and urban, rich and poor, but looking also more broadly at the global level of how essential questions of access and questions of digital literacy are, so that we can all participate actively in the transformation of our world. And this is absolutely crucial, and thank you for underlining that in your introductory remarks. I'd now like to turn to our esteemed panelists to ask, and I am sure that a lot of their input will reflect some of the conversations that you had, how, in your opinion, can digital technologies help meet the UN Sustainable Development Goals and fight inequalities? And I would like to start with Her Royal Highness Princess Djigma.
Hello? I can speak louder.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Your Excellency, Mrs. Commissioner from the African Union, Your Excellency, Commissioner for the European Commission. You see that I'm emotional because what you have said and the sisters, she paved the way. That's why also that I'm here. Education is key. To address to your question, how? You know, digitalization is an enabler, a key to reach, to access to the full range of opportunities. And I think that if we want to walk the talk is go for implementation. The solutions are there. We have the blockchain. I experienced myself in Burkina-Faso with the value chain of women and 1.3 million women. We find out that their revenue per hour was less than a cent. That's what technology also shows. But we shouldn't be complaining by saying, well, we made that diagnostic, but we're going to change the way of doing development, but going for business expansion. See, when you see me, when you see the sisters and the brothers in the countryside, see business partners who are mature. Skills are really critical and very important. The first thing that human beings need really to take the importance is about your health. This is your first asset. And education. When you got both, and with education, it's not only what we have at school, but also what the parents give to us. The SDGs, digitalization is a cross-cutting. We cannot go and say, yes, we're going to do this. We will find it in all range of going for health, agriculture, and processing, as His Excellency said, with energy, how we consume, and how we can really push forward. Digitalization enables all of this. And I think we need to really mainstream that in all the policies. And it's very important to see that the development agencies changing their mind, and we really welcome that, and to see also that the European Commission changing his way and inviting us. A decade ago, you won't see me here, but I'm an engineer, and I have that diploma in Europe. But I wouldn't have been invited. But because the sister, she said that enough is enough. It's time also to invite the billion bottom who contributing to the SDGs, to economic growth, to be part of the value chain. So I will stop there and then continue later the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Princess Djigma. Mrs. IRERE, how do you see digital technologies contributing to the achievement of the SDGs and reducing inequalities in your vast experience, both as an entrepreneur, but also now as a member of the government of Rwanda?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for the question. Distinguished panelists, excellencies, all protocol observed. It's my honor and pleasure to be here and to be able to share experiences, my own experience, but also the government of Rwanda's experience in this whole digital journey in reducing inequalities. And I would like to really emphasize that, yes, technology or digitalization has the power of actually reducing the inequalities. And I'd like to probably depict this with an example of, we've seen what, when you put technology in the hands of the people, you know, when you're able to invest enough in putting technology in the hands of the people, there's a wave of opportunities and possibilities that just unravel, and you know, it can blow your mind. Rwanda in 2000 made a deliberate decision, and they made technology a cross-cutting pillar in its development pathway. And it wasn't just a plan, and I'd like to emphasize, because I heard you talking to the colleague about an action plan. Now that we have a report, where's the action plan? It was a phased approach to this journey. And the first phase was actually ensuring that the leadership is put in place. Institutional framework, regulation, who's going to implement. All these things had to be in place. And that was done in a span of 5 years. The following 5 years, now the government focused on investing, you know, hardcore investment in infrastructure, in skills, in data storage and exchange, all these things. We had to make sure that they're available so that the citizens are able to actually harness. Now, the third phase, which is when I actually joined the government, the third phase was now service delivery and service development. You have institutions, you have infrastructure. What is it that you now need to do? And while we're at this is when everything really started to unfold. The government itself started putting the services online through a government platform called IREMBO. Now, even the private sector joined the league, and you could see that sectors such as transport, financial services were, one by one getting digitized. And I wanted to particularly focus on IREMBO. And I can see that the time is not on my side. I'll probably come back. But with IREMBO, when it was put online, no one wanted to join. Literally, it's like forcing citizens to start using these services. They're used to their manual services. But 2, 3, 4 years down the road, we have more than 7.5 million users on this platform. More than 40,000 jobs have been created because of this platform. A new manufacturing and assembly plant of smartphones has just established itself, resulting in the increase in internet penetration and service consumption, and more is yet to come. So I'll just stop here and I'll discuss the rest after. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. IRERE, for underlining some of the concrete contribution of investment in the digital economy in Rwanda and the returns on this investment, but also for highlighting the importance of the financing and access to financing aspect in order to scale these initiatives that are working on the ground beyond national borders. Mr. GUISLAIN, please, how, in your opinion, can investing in digital economy and technology change and access reduction in inequalities and the SDGs?
Thanks a lot. And it's clear, and we all, I guess, are convinced of that the transformational potential of digital economies is huge. If you look at Africa, people might wonder why focus on that today and not on water or education, etc. Clearly, we need to focus on everything. Probably the most impactful sector reform that we've seen in Africa over the past 2 decades has been the mobile revolution. Go 20 years back, people thought mobile was a technology for the rich. Look at it today. Mobile has expanded. There's about close to 50% access in Africa. Mobile is providing not just voice and data connectivity, but also access to financial services. Africa has become the home to digital money in many ways. So you see a lot of innovation happening that contributes directly to inclusion and to partial solutions to achieving the SDGs and achieving them faster than one would otherwise. What one saw 20 years ago with the old telecom sector, we kind of see it again now. And so one of the key challenges will be, how do we open up the system? How do we kind of help Africa develop this single digital market, maybe gradually go beyond 54 small markets that are kind of too small? How do we help the potential of digital technologies is to go across sectors. So we need to change the telecom sector and open it up to new actors and new energies, but also give it the opportunity to open up beyond national borders. But we also need to open up other sectors. For example, the financial sector, digital financial inclusion has expanded at an extraordinary rapid pace. The number of Africans to today have access to some type of financial services, not always full banking service, but sometimes an account, payment service, etc., has increased dramatically thanks to digital financial inclusion. That has been made possible because somehow in the beginning, companies from one sector were allowed to do things that were not really in their sector, but in another sector. So I'd like to emphasize the cross-sectoral dimensions of of digital innovation and the importance to ensure that there's enough consensus and enough engagement of key stakeholders to open up these sectors. We need more competition in transport, in financial services, in health, etc. That will bring more services, more innovation, and also the potential for more inclusion, but that also requires that one changes some of the regulation, that one go and look from a traditional sector ministry, sector regulator, sector companies outlook to an outlook that is much less clear, where lots of actors operate and kind of in similar spaces, and where the opportunity to innovate is really protected in a sense. So I see this huge transformational opportunity, but we need to open up the system and we need to support reforms that will enable these new technologies to develop and to serve the poor and the less well-off as well.
Thank you very much, especially for underlining the importance of competitivity and mobile economy. I know, having lived for a very long time in Senegal, that 98% of the population in Senegal access the internet through their mobile phones. And there are more SIM cards in circulation in Senegal than there are people on the ground. Because depending on the promo offre on the ground, you use a different SIM card. And so this question of competitivity on the ground and the role of the private sector is crucial. And in this regard, I'm very happy to have with us today members of the private sector representing this very multi-stakeholder and inclusive approach to talking about digital economy and digital transformation with us here today. And in this regard, Mr. Hemingway, I'd be very interested to hear from you, in your perspective and from the private sector perspective, what is the role of digital technologies in reaching the SDGs and reducing inequalities?
Absolutely. And first off, it's delighted to be here representing the commercial sector in amongst such a distinguished panel, so thank you for the invite. Obviously, for those who don't know SES, we provide digital connectivity services on a global basis, but very specifically a very large amount of that over the African nations, and that's where our experience has come from. And I find it a staggering statistic that's in the report here about, broadband penetration has grown from like 2% to 25% over the last handful of years, but that leaves, again, a staggering number of people that aren't connected. And a related report I was reading that also said somewhere between 8 or 9 out of 10 young people do not have access to the internet. And whilst we get incredible good feeling from connecting cell towers for 4G rollout, and that gets good people's social access, what we find way more important is when those young people grow into young business leaders and they have access to cloud productivity tools, so they can develop their businesses using the next generation of tools rather than relying on sort of yesterday's generation of technologies, and that's really significant. And the other thing I'd say from a sort of private entity point of view, we've done lots of projects, and I think the sustainable point in the SDGs that the UN have laid out is how do we make these sustainable and not just projects. And I'll very quickly outline the 3 that we tend to have some ingredient that I think we can leverage. The first is the projects that have been in support of e-government, e-health, e-education. Yes, they're typically funded by the local government or some other such body, but they're delivering a specific social benefit. But the follow-on from that, these become hubs of learning, hubs of training, hubs of shared experience of what the internet can do for people who go and use those hubs way beyond their intended purpose. So I think more of those projects will give us an expanded use of what the internet can do. The second one is where we've managed to find local partners, which I'll be honest is sometimes hard, where these local partners are providing internet services on the back of our services. They know the local community, they know what the community wants, they know what content the communities want, in what languages they want, they know what town to go to next. And when we've found that secret sauce of having the right partners to do that, that's been a really successful model for us. So again, number 2 of the some things there that we can sustain, I think is there. And the last one is, as I said to the first point, those projects that have been directly connecting businesses, businesses that are not just trying to do social stuff, which is really important to connect to the world, but businesses that want to leverage these next generation of tools, get access to the digital marketplace, sell their wares on a global place, Pan-African connectivity and Pan-African sales distribution. All of these tools are absolutely available to those like me who are blessed to live in America and the UK to get access to them without even thinking. These can be developed and access to these businesses in these nations. They're the sort of three factors that I'm really interested to see how can we make these sustainable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hemingway. We're also lucky to have with us here today the private sector from the African continent, and I would love to hear from Mr. Az Al-Arab, with whom I got to talk informally in the 1 minute and meet, as it concerns his vision, how he sees the investment in digital technology as crucial to meeting the SDGs and reducing inequalities in where he's working.
Okay, you have to look at technology is not as an objective. It's a tool, really, to improve people's life. So when we talk about fintechs or connectivity, you have to understand what's the reason or what you want to achieve. We on the banking sector, we are a private sector bank, and why do we invest in technology? Is it to compete? No, we have a strong belief that we need to reduce the transaction cost. And transaction cost, we need to reduce it down to almost zero. That means that you're going to provide financial service to a larger number of people and have at much lower cost. Think of remittance cross-border in countries. How much people pay in remittance for normal transfers? You're talking about 7, 8, 9, 10%. Think of using technology and using blockchain. You can reduce that to a cent. Okay, to less than 1%. How this will improve people's life. Think of technology about how you reach farmers or individuals in remote areas using the banking and providing them with financial service. Because based on their behavior, they can have access to credit, and cheaper credit than the usual supply chain credit. Think about the retail a simple small retailer. He gets most of his financing, or she gets most of her financing through what you call it the wholesaler. The wholesaler charges are enormous. They're sometimes 100%, 200%, 300%. When they start to use the new technology and dealing with a bank or a financial institution, we start to build track record, history. And from that behavior, she or he can have access to finance. And that access to finance will be at competitive commercial rates, not at the 200 and 300%. So there is something in our DNA. Yes, we want to make money. Yes, we want to grow. Yes, we want to have larger number of customers. But number one purpose is, what is our contribution to the society? And our main contribution to society here, how to improve the society life, because they are not there just to make money and pay dividends and that's it. What's your reason to exist there? So from that side, even our contribution during the task force, we're always talking about how we simplify things, how you have easier regulation, because how can governments allow big data to be a tool for giving credit rather than the credit bureau? So it's all going or evolving around that point. And I'm happy to elaborate further. I have a long list here, but I know the time is limited.
Thank you very much. Thank you for underlining.
Thank you.
The importance of also going back to what Commissioner Gabriel was saying in the beginning of changing the way in which we work, that financial investment can yield both profit for the private sector and also profit at large for the community. And this is something essential and also very much put forward by emerging technologies such as blockchain that you underlined. So I hope we will have the opportunity as the debate progresses to talk more about that. Madame HOUNDJO, in your opinion, and as a very dynamic youth working on the ground in Benin, how do you see digital technologies contributing to the SDGs and reducing inequalities?
Okay, thank you. At this centre, we are doing everything online. To prove to be here, you are planning online. To say that digital technologies are affecting our life every day. And it enables real opportunity for companies it enables companies to develop new business model that create to facilitate innovation and growth. And also, it is an efficient way to keep in touch with providers and customers. For young women, it is an opportunity to express themselves by blogging, for example, and also to start a business and have purchasing power by trading online, for example, and then they can achieve SDG 5, gender equality, and also SDG 8. For young people, access to internet and to this technology could help them to fully realize themselves and then break the cycle of poverty, achieving SDG 1. One thing that is amazing when we talk about digital tools or digital world is that anyone can become an actor. With the basic skills, anyone can become actor and have positive impact. I think it is important that people to understand that with this transformation, with this digital transformation, the nature of work has changed and will continue changing. So as a young woman living in Benin, my commitment is to bring girls and women closer to the digital world. With my community in Benin, Women Tech Makers Abome Kalavi, we are highly involved in how to create a world where girls and women are empowered to lead in technologies. They receive resources, mentoring, role model that could help them to create digital solutions adapted to our own realities. And that is very important. We need solutions adapted to our realities. And also, I involved in how to use digital technologies to start a business, to do a business online. So let's all encourage women, let's all encourage young people to lead in technology and shape the digital transformation. Good. Thank you.
Bravo.
I hope everyone in the room understands very clearly why she's an EDD young leader after listening to her speak. This was a very clear call for action, very concrete examples as it concerns the contribution of digital technologies to the SDGs. And particularly, thank you for underlining that anyone can become an actor. And I would add here that not only can anyone become an actor, but everyone has to be an actor. And we move from this multi-stakeholder approach to an omni-stakeholder approach, thanks to investment and access to digital technologies. So thank you for underlining that. I know you have had a call that you are launching as it concerns participation in the African digital revolution, and I will be the first to sign up on it once it goes online. So thank you for all of the work that you're doing on the ground there. I would like now to transition to our second sequence, which looks specifically at talking about key recommendations of the report of the EU-AU Digital Economy Task Force, New Africa-Europe Digital Economy Partnership, accelerating the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. I mentioned it in the beginning, but it is available online for free. Please download it. I know that this is the first of several milestones going forward where multi-stakeholder consultation and input will be sought in order to implement the recommendations made, and we welcome all of your input here today in that regard. I would like to first pass the floor to Mr. GUISLAIN. It's a pleasure, as always, to see you, particularly again in your home country. You are Vice President of the African Development Bank, and in this regard, you have coordinated the bank's High Five priority to industrialize Africa and co-steer the Integrate Africa initiative. In this framework, you also co-chaired the Digital Economy Task Force with Ursula Owusu-Ekuful, Minister of Communications from Ghana, and a shiro to many women working in the digital space. Could you please provide us with an overview of the report and the process of the task force?
Okay, thank you. So I think some of my colleagues will get more into the details of the report itself. But so, as has been mentioned already by the Commission and by others, It was launched, the effort was launched in Vienna last December at the EU-Africa Summit on the Digital Economy, and a group of 20 experts, 10 African and 10 European, worked hard with staff from the two commissions to prepare the report. It was a very interactive process. It was at times very heated with different views coming together, and at least my view is that it has come together very beautifully in a balanced document that really sets out the state of the land and opportunities, suggestions, proposals for action. So from that point of view, I think it's a tremendous effort and one that we will need to continue. You just mentioned stakeholder engagement. We need to take this report to Africa now. I mean, it was in Bucharest, I think, last week, and in Brussels this week. We need to take it to Africa. We need to socialize it there, get people involved, because a lot of the recommendations could really have a profound impact. As Commissioner Gabriel and others have already highlighted, the report is organized in 4 main sections. The first section is really on expanding connectivity and access, with an emphasis on universal access to broadband services, seen as something really important to enable full access to the digital economy. The second pillar is focused on skills and developing the skills in the population to be able to participate and to engage in this digital economy. So it's second pillar on skills. Third pillar is on entrepreneurship and everything that is required to create an ecosystem that will help support and develop digital innovation and entrepreneurship, including access to finance, proper business environment, etc. So that's the third big pillar. And finally, the last one is on the acceleration of the adoption of e-services, because there's no point in having all this infrastructure, in training all these people, if it is not to provide new and better services. And maybe I'll just say one word on that one. Governments and development agencies, I think, have an important role to play. They're key actors in the economy in Africa. And it's time that they, and when I say they, it's both African governments and development players who are active in Africa, including the African Development Bank, switch to the digital mode. I think we need to switch to the digital mode. We need, if it comes to government, to create many more services that people need and want, that can reach people faster, more effectively, more transparently, and more universally, that will then require more access, and etc. So it's the 4 pillars. That's the main point I want to make here, are interrelated. If we only work on one of them, we're not going to get a digital economy. We really need to work on the 4. In some countries, one may be more of a bottleneck than another, and you may need to emphasize that one. But it's really important to have this broader ecosystem in mind. It is not a report on ICT. It is a report on digital economy, its transformational potential, and its really importance in deepening inclusion. So my hope is that we can continue this debate that we are starting here in many African countries, that we can have it there with similar stakeholders, government, private sector, from all types of sectors, that we can also have it at regional level. Because we mentioned, I think, already digital single market as one of the goals we want to pursue. That involves, it's a complicated process, and I think we can also benefit from the experience of the European Commission in helping us walk that path. So, in a few words, this has been an intensive 6 months, one where I've certainly appreciated the quality of the contributions of the members, also the quality of the staff who supported the team, and I'm certainly very pleased to have been asked with Ursula, the Minister of Communication of Ghana, to co-chair this work, and I certainly remain committed to help implement these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. GUISLAIN. Thank you above all for your leadership with the Minister of Communications of Ghana in coordinating the work of the Digital Economy Task Force. I will buy you coffee after this auditorium debate because I'm sure you haven't slept in a very long time, but everybody is very much appreciative both of your work and commitment, not only in developing the report, but in going forward implementing the recommendations. So thank you for your leadership in that regard. Her Royal Highness Princess Djigma, as chair of the Princess Abze Djigma Foundation, and in the framework of your initiative to establish a grant fund to allocate credit for connecting women to the internet and establishing e-commerce networks using blockchain technologies, you see firsthand how important it is to empower women and youth in Africa with the necessary digital skills to participate in the digital economy. You are also a member of the Digital Economy Task Force. Can you tell us a little bit more about the recommendations of the report, specifically as it concerns upskilling and capacity building to ensure digital literacy and inclusion?
Thank you very much, sister. I think, you know, it's very, we were very focused on results. You have institutions at a regional level, at a national level. We need to release the adapted fund to scale up and use the diaspora like me. So I didn't wait to be pushed to do that, but it's an example to push the skills. Because without the skills, let's be honest, and that works for any business. If you don't have skilled people, you cannot grow your business. And I think that focusing first on that pillar is key. And as the minister, but vous allez être président, bien sûr. I don't know how I'm saying it, but he was saying, I think to go concrete, within the task force, we already started the discussion and making coalition with SES, for instance, to deploy what we have done successfully in Burkina-Faso. And for instance, from one country to another and scale. And Egypt also has very good expertise on skills. This is something that we also can take in your region to go into ECOWAS region. The banks have solutions. Don't start from scratch regarding access to finance and also regarding skills because they needed that to grow their business. That was part of the recommendations. Furthermore, it's about when you get your skills, what next? Access to market. We need to think in the integrated way. This is also what was part of our recommendation to see where we can really come together with the pillars because they are interacting. I need connectivity, I need skilled people to do the job, and as I'm doing the connectivity work, it should be also used for technology transfer and capacity building transfer. This is how also we're mutualizing the funds and using it in the optimized way. Do a lot with less. And tap in again in the diaspora. They are natural ambassadors in your businesses to develop, to go into market. Please use us. And the ECOWAS region that I know best, we already start implementing that. And linking it with energy, because without energy also, whatever we do, we cannot process. If you have the devices, you produce it need to be plugged, and then we can use the community networks. All of these are new jobs. Africa needs to create 18 million jobs a year. So where can we find it? Digitalization, it's a way also to bring new jobs. And where we see informal sector, I see startups. And we learn a lot from them in terms of flexibility and banks. But you know, the telco company, they're doing huge billions with the informal sector. But it's a matter of formalizing. And I think the digitalization is really the opportunity to formalize our economy. And we are ready to pay taxes. And we do know that if we pay taxes, we can create that enabling environment. Have also that credit story that my brother banker from Egypt need, and the African Development Bank, to really bring it. Let me tell you, we just launched with the IRERE, ECOWAS Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, the West Africa Solar Pack. I was very amazed that we already mobilized €1 billion of impact finance, showing that when we are mobilized, when we show professionalism, the money is not the problem. It's about getting the job done, get the skilled people at the right place, get the right policy, and open the market. And so the result of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for underlining this catchphrase, money is not a problem, that we should not wait for financing in order to proceed, and also for underlining the very important role of the diaspora in the implementation of these recommendations, as well as the transformation of the informal sector. I see that Commissioner ABOU-ZEID would like to intervene briefly before I pass the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Natasha. Effectively, I wanted to intervene actually because there are two things that were said by my brother, Vice President GUISLAIN, and my sister, Her Royal Highness next to me, that I think we should retain, and they come very clearly in the, not only in their interventions, but in the report. One, that our work is people-centered. And here I want to build on what Mr. Al-Arab just said. We are not here talking about technology as technical matters. Technical matters resolve themselves. This is not about that. It's about how to use this technology that's just been offered to us as enabler to improve the lives of people. And that is the crucial matter. And this is how we are dealing with it in Africa. And not only to improve the lives of people, the lives of our institutions, the way we work to help us, go forward. And you both said something very interesting, both you and Mr. Al-Arab. You mentioned blockchain. And you mentioned democratization. Guess who is the first country in this world who ever used blockchain technology in elections? Yeah. One small country in Africa, but big in terms of adoption of new ideas, Sierra Leone. And this is how, that's the power of technology. We don't have to follow the path that was followed by others. We are paving our own path. This is one. The second element that I wanted to emphasize that also came in your conversation, in the report, and beyond, also at the heart of the work of the African Union, integration. You mentioned this several times, my sister. And why integration is important? Because suddenly, instead of 55 fragmented economies across the continent, we will be having this huge continent as one market, as one big, huge opportunity. So we need to think beyond our national interest and how to make use of our unity to leap forward. I mentioned in my intervention the African Free Trade Area, but I want also to talk about a different aspect, or a little bit different. In our striving moving forward using this technology via the different platforms that Mr. GUISLAIN mentioned in his, and the services that this technology offers, we need to think about interoperability. Because we need to go together differently, maybe on different paths, because on the continent of Africa, we are not all at the same level of development and not at the same level of development of certain sectors, but we need to go in a harmonized way. So interoperability is another buzzword that we need also to keep in mind in going forward to make sure that through this big continent, this one market that starts just in a few weeks' time in July, we are moving together in the right direction. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner ABOU-ZEID, for underlining not only the ways in which African countries can be a standard setter for and an innovator for the use of technologies, but also the possibilities and importance of a digital single market, as well as putting interoperability at the heart of innovations that will be developed by and for the continent. Now I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Hemingway. As CEO of SES, which is the Société Européenne des Satellites, you are strongly involved in the deployment deployment of e-services and e-projects in Africa, providing end-to-end network solutions and deploying state-of-the-art satellites to close the digital gap in Africa. In your role as CEO, you see firsthand the importance of connectivity and infrastructure. Can you tell us more about the recommendations of the report, specifically as it concerns this question of connectivity?
Absolutely, and obviously connectivity is one piece, as we've been talking about before. It's the skills, it's the business models, it's the financing. But to focus back onto connectivity for a second, I think one of the critical points of the report is that you need to connect to where the communities are. There's been an awful lot of focus and investment and subsidization on the international connectivity. Very large submarine cables connecting into the coast of Africa. And if anybody's looked at these digital maps of Africa, you'll see almost like capillaries or tendrils coming in from the coast. But guess what? They stop in the middle. So what we've got to look at is how do we bring complete connectivity solutions, and I'll use the phrase interoperability as another great one here. We have to look at fiber, at satellite, at Wi-Fi. All these last mile technologies need to be brought together, and I think the report does a great job of saying we need to bring these together in an ecosystem. Otherwise, you won't get to where the users are. I mean, I think the report calls this out. There's over 500 million people, even after all these cables going in, will still be more than 25 kilometers away from that nearest cable. So they're not going to be able to get the benefits of this high-performance broadband. So that's one of the things that we as industry and the report calls out is we've got to bring all of these technologies together, integrate them, and by the way, find out fantastic local technologies that are being developed. I was speaking to Princess Djigma before, and there's some fantastic companies. We could build all this great communications technology, but if there's not a power grid or if there's not a local power system or local solar panels, it's not going to do anything, it's going to be dead. So we have to bring this together. So for me, one of the biggest takeaways is seamless connectivity beyond just international, cross-border connections, national backhaul, and last-mile technology, all underpinned by the power systems and everything else that goes with that. There's a huge amount of investment going on, making these things simple to deploy, simple to maintain, because these are hard-to-reach places in some cases. The second piece, I won't reiterate too much, is the funding for these. You know, we've found the most successful ones have got some kind of PPP, the public-private partnership, to get these things off the ground. And they need to be structured in a way that address both CapEx and OpEx spend so that they can be delivered for a point until they're sustainable. I go back to that sustainable point. I don't want to see a project last for 6 months. That's no interest and no use to anybody. And the last one is a call to the sort of regulations. And again, this is almost under the banner of integration again as well. If each country is going to have a different set of regulations about who can operate, what kind of services that you can operate, the spectrum that's available across, again, Wi-Fi, satellite, cellular services, if we want to deliver something at scale, it'd be really great to get a common standard of these regulations. What can we all do? And if we can do it at scale, we can do it far more effectively. So that's something that I'd like to see. And there's a great example. If we're going to go to a small community, you're not going to have 3 people building telecoms networks out to that small community. You're going to build it once. And if we can get regulations that solve how network sharing, which is a really well understood concept, but to do well needs good regulations, how do we do network sharing successfully? So you build it once and have 3 people serving services. That's something else that we would love to see rolled out more universally.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hemingway, for underlining also the importance of public-private partnerships. This goes back also to what the Commissioner was saying in her introductory remarks with regards to changing not only the way we work, but how fast we work, and the ways in which public and private sector partnerships can accelerate this kind of cooperation and transformation on the ground is absolutely essential. You also mentioned the importance of regulation, and I think right now we're witnessing a very interesting time of changes in the way in which we regulate or co-regulate. And so that is also something that I'm sure we will talk about further in the debate tomorrow, also at the report with regards to models for co-regulation. Mr. Az Al-Arab, as Managing Director of the Commercial International Bank in Egypt, you have been awarded the Emirate Finance's Best CEO in Egypt and Africa Award, and in 2016 was recognized by Euromoney for your outstanding contribution to financial services in the Middle East. So clearly, you know very much firsthand the importance of ensuring quality e-services, but also entrepreneurship skills in order to transform not only the lives of individuals on on the ground in Africa, but the lives of the that change because of the services that are provided out of these innovations. Can you tell us more about the recommendations of the report in the field of entrepreneurship and e-services as a very successful entrepreneur yourself?
How much time do I have?
4 minutes. And I'll do jazz hands if you go over.
Okay. Well, I'll try to be very, very brief because the report full of details, but I will highlight only the most important things. When you talk about the entrepreneurship, I think the promote and harmonize the digital enabling environment is across Africa is the key thing. And one of the recommendations we made is the lower regulation, administrative barriers, more policy flexibility, and provide public-private dialogue, which you mentioned before. This to support the national governments, really to understand the impact of laws on the future of the entrepreneurship. The other thing that we recommended is the Pan-African financial inclusion and access to finance. And let me tell you this about the access to finance. Think about that last year, the startups in Africa got almost 1/5 of the financing that India got. And India got 5 folds more for a startup financing. And this is why in the report we say governments has to co-invest in startups. We're not saying the government should invest in startups, but they need to co-invest in startups with the private sector as well. That will help a lot the entrepreneurship. When you're talking about the e-services, the 3 pillars there is the e-governance service, e-commerce, and what you call it, the digital financial services. I will stop only at the e-commerce because this is very critical. And since Commissioner ABOU-ZEID here, I think integrating the e-commerce into the African continental free trade area this is going to be very important to help the e-commerce. And by the way, e-commerce will never work without financial inclusion, because by unifying the payment system in Africa, that makes it easy. I will talk about personal experience in the past, and I was just telling one of our colleagues here this afternoon, what we used to do before is if I'm dealing with a bank in Nigeria or a bank in Kenya in trade finance, we used to go to a third party to confirm our transaction and letter of credits. And we decided, give me a break. I cannot be part of this continent, and I want to invest there, I want to do business there, and I cannot deal directly with my counterparts there. So we started in about 8 countries in looking at the counterparties there. And we picked so far in our pilot project 27 financial institutions that we are happy to do directly trade business with, either imports and export cross-border. And by the way, if each single financial institution, leaders on the market, start to do that, that will facelift how trade is being done. Okay? I can go on if you want. I have a long list here. But one thing I have to say here, I'm really very proud and honored to be part of the task force. And maybe at the beginning, people were saying, private sector bank, why there? We really enjoyed it. We learned a lot, and we contributed, I think, a lot to the report. In a nutshell, if you ask me again, I will do it once, twice, 3 times. We will devote the time with the team. Because the outcome of this report is, it tells us all there is a common ground between the European Union and the African Union for cooperation and for future development. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Al-Arab, for your contributions in the framework of the task force, and also for underlining very clearly the role of the private sector in moving these recommendations forward. You mentioned also the need to co-invest in startups, and I think some of the new legislation coming out of countries like Tunisia and Mali and Senegal with regards to the adoption of startup acts are representative of this co-investment and a very important way forward for public-private sector partnerships to support the digital entrepreneurship ecosystem from the ground up. Commissioner Gabriel, please, I know you have a comment.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to draw your attention to one of the measures set out in the report. Now, obviously, I've listened to all of your recommendations, and you didn't disappoint. You really went to the heart of the action. But let me talk about the digital innovation hubs. Now, we have moved from 320 to 440 labs. And we're facing up to the same challenges. The challenges are there. They don't link in sometimes together. We don't know who's specialized in what. But there are a few things that are missing, and I think we're going to translate those for the digital innovation hubs in Europe. Now, there's a digital innovation hub in each region. So, let's say you're in a rural area. Well, it's not the same. Well, so you shouldn't have to go 600 kilometers to go to one of these hubs. So that's a very important dimension. It needs to be close to people. Furthermore, we need to ensure that SMEs have access. They should have priority access. They should be able to go to one place where they can say, look, your product is focused on a particular niche. What kind of financing is available at a national level, at an international level? So they should be able to know in advance what kind of administrative procedures exist. And they need to have a streamlined procedure to access their market. And then they can take their risks. And then we should ensure that the innovation hubs offer training for local people to ensure that people on the ground, local people, can work together for development, for their region, for their country, for their continent. And I think it is high time now that we set up a network between these digital innovation hubs, and then later on what we could do, we could think about the specializations. Some are specialized in AI, others in blockchain, some will focus on cybersecurity. So I think here there is some space to optimize. There's a lot of talent around, there's a lot of energy, and what we need to do is we need to harmonize it, have synergy, and that will give us better results.
Thank you very much for underlining, Commissioner Gabriel, the importance of platforms. And I think one of the subtexts of your message just now is that there's space for everyone. And what we have to ensure is not only that we cross-cut and mainstream investment in digital technology across all sectors, but also that we ensure international platforms for cooperation and dialogue so that these hubs are talking to each other and can build on these experiences. Thank you for underlining that, and also for championing the establishment of many of these hubs, both in the EU and in Africa. We have talked about the report and the recommendations, but now these beautiful recommendations need to be translated to practices and commitments on the ground. And I'm very happy to have with us here today Mrs. IRERE, who comes, in fact, from an entrepreneurship background, because before becoming permanent secretary at the Ministry of ICT and Innovation in Rwanda, you co-founded and set up Fab Lab in Rwanda and worked for the Rwanda online platform that worked to digitize government services for citizens and businesses in Rwanda. So you have these multiple hats in the trajectory of your career, and I'm curious, based on the recommendations, what do you see as best practices in Rwanda that could be reproduced, noting that you are also one of the motors behind Girls in ICT in Rwanda and have championed participation of women in the digital sector on the ground in Rwanda, which in reality is a model not only for the African continent, but for the world as it concerns public participation of women in the digital sector, in government and beyond.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very loaded question. But yes, one of the things, and I think I also talked about it, I think that leadership and being deliberate about some of these actions is very important. You know, part of the main reason why some of the things seem to be working in Rwanda and in the many other African countries that you've enlisted is because leadership is really backing it up. And I think that's our role, you know. Having been in the private sector and then moved to the government, and really seeing from the Rwanda's experience what works and how it works, is that because the leadership leads, and it leads by example. And when they do that, even the citizens follow. In many other economies, it's actually the other way around, and especially when it comes to digital, you see the young people and everyone that is actually embracing these digital technologies, they are the ones that are really changing how things are done. And then the best practices, in my experience, would be to have a plan, make sure that you really have a plan, phase it because you're not going to have investment and resources that are unlimited. Work on what you know you can do. Make sure that the private sector is involved because it's a very important key player. Create the excitement around what you're trying to do in youth. I think you just mentioned the hubs, the innovation hubs that are around the continent. Use them. Use them to actually instill the change. And then lastly, create policies and regulations that are very inclusive in a way that you think about even the people that no one ever thinks about. Earlier you talked about how in our phased approach, in our third phase, service delivery and everything else that came up, we realized that something was not working. You've put all these government services online, you've really heavily invested in all these things, but then citizens are not using these, you know, these services, these platforms that you've put there. The return on investment, it's like, you know, there's this analogy. It's like taking a walk in a highway that you've really invested in so much. And so, but the missing link there was the digital skills. People did not have the skills. And we had to really go back and redesign programs that now actually ensure that not only you're targeting citizens, you know, in general, but you're looking at women who tend to be, you know, behind, are not included. You're looking at people with disabilities. You're looking at youth, and you're actually looking at the population in general. And we've had to come up with the National Digital Talent Policy that looks at the different levels that you need to address. You have the pyramid, the base of the pyramid, where you have more than 5 million citizens that don't have any whatsoever basic skill to do these things. And then you have the middle layer, the digital workforce that has a little bit, but that needs to be improved because they're not actually even consuming what you've put online. Then you have the top of the pyramid where you have the elite. And the elite always want to go and work abroad and work in these big, you know, no one is coming back. And we've had to redesign programs that actually address all these levels. And so, in a nutshell, I think the Rwandan experience is not so much about, we've not done any miracles. It's actually going back and understanding our own context and looking at really evaluating and assessing at every stage and seeing what is it that is not working and how do we make sure that we move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for highlighting the experience of Rwanda. and above all, the need to have a plan developed by and for Africans in Africa. I think also one thing that you mentioned that was of particular pertinence going forward with regards to the implementation of the recommendations is making sure that the work is people-centered and that we use the private sector, that we use the hubs, and that we ensure policies that are inclusive. And in this regard, I would also like to salute the government of Rwanda for having established one of the first participatory public policy processes as it concerns the establishment of a public policy that would encourage an entrepreneurship ecosystem that would particularly favorize small enterprises and the participation of women and youth. And this is indeed an example that going forward, we look forward to scaling in other countries. Before going to the closing segment, and I thank the technicians for their patience, I would just like to pass the floor very briefly to Mrs. HOUNDJO, because in your application as an EDD young leader from Benin and representing the Internet Society of Benin, you said, I want to contribute to the digital transformation of my country, and I want to mobilize other talented people to fight for an African digital revolution with me. I also know that you have a hidden talent as a poetry slam artist, and that you did a poem in front of the Ministry of Planning and Development of Germany as it concerns the need to bridge the digital divide. And I mention this because going forward, one of the things that needs to be at the heart of the way in which we implement these recommendations is creativity. We do not need just technologists and innovators, we need creative thinkers. So I would like to give you, before going to the closing segment, the voice to talk very concretely from the youth perspective, what you see needs to be done in the immediate in order to bridge the digital divide so that youth can participate fully in digital transformation.
Okay, thank you so much. We have spoken about how digital technologies and how digitalization can help people to grow and help to achieve sustainable development goals. But for the reality, for many people around the world, and especially in developing countries like Benin, the reality is very different. People don't even have access to electricity. And if you have internet in rural area, mainly in rural area, it will very difficult to have access to internet, and internet is not affordable for those people. So I think it is very important to work together, because some countries in Africa are able, well, I think yes, are able to start and grow with digitalization, and yes, there are lots of who are not able to shape this transformation. So people, African countries need to work together, because for 90% of the job now and for the future, we require and are requiring technology and digital skills. So it is important that all the policymakers and all the policymakers at high level and at local level be aware about the importance of digitalization, because we need to, it is important, it's very important to know that, because we know, yes, Africa is the youngest continent, but Africa is not really led by youngest. People are older, yes, but they are not really aware about the importance of digitalization. Also, we have to work in human capital. And work in human capital, this work must start by educational system. We have to work on our educational system. We have to teach people from the youngest stage how it is important to use digital technologies. People must know that, and it is very important that people understand this thing and grow with that. Also, we need to encourage women, youngest people, and especially women, to create solutions. Yes, we are Africa. We need African solution for Africa. Yes, it is very important. We need African solution for Africa. Also, we have talked about infrastructure. Yes, it is important. It is important to have infrastructure, but be sure and be sure that these infrastructure are open, are accessible, and are low cost, because the major part of the population don't have the purchasing power, yes, to to shape this, to access this infrastructure. So you need to be sure that these infrastructure are accessible to everyone. So I think it is important, and let's all encourage African solution for Africa. Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you very much, Ms. HOUNDJO, for ending this session with the African solutions for the African continent, which loops perfectly back into the opening by Commissioner GABRIEL as it concerns reimagining ways of cooperation and working together. The voice of youth, as you underlined earlier, the ways in which we work are transforming and changing, and we must adapt and ensure an inclusive approach. And I hope that this panel, with the different stakeholders around the table, have underlined exactly this, the importance of working together going forward. In the next few months, the EU, the AU, and partners will design the implementation roadmap that will translate policy recommendations and actions into concrete initiatives. In this regard, when you see the report, you will see the description of a shared vision of a digital economy, and I would like to close with these words that are at the heart of the report. The parties of the DETF share a long-term vision of an inclusive digital economy and society in which every citizen, notably women and young people, have the opportunity to participate in the digital world. Due attention is given to the challenges of job displacement, disinformation, protection of both privacy and human rights. A more harmonized set of policies, rules, and legislation at the regional and continental level lead to increased investment, while workers' and consumers' rights are protected. E-government services are interoperable and accessible. Regardless of the country of origin, digital entrepreneurs are able to set up businesses with ease at low administrative costs and data. Digital goods, services, and physical products associated with intra-African digital trade circulate freely across borders. And I think this responds very much, Mrs. HOUNDJO, to your call for an African digital revolution incarnated by the shared vision of the Digital Economy Task Force, in line not only with Agenda 2030, but Agenda 2063 of the African Union. This large debate is the beginning of a longer debate that we hope you will participate in, both through the multi-stakeholder consultation processes going forward as it concerns developing a roadmap and implementing the recommendations, but also tomorrow there will be a large debate from 1 to 2:15 in room D7, where the presentation of the report will occur, moderated by Mr. GUISLAIN, and this will be an opportunity to both provide your input to the report and also ways to cooperate and reimagine models of cooperation going forward. And in this regard, UNESCO looks forward to continuing to support the work of the EU Commission and the AU Commission and the Digital Economy Task Force to realize this vision alongside all of you. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Please stick around so that you can talk with the panelists. Please download this report, and we look forward to both your contributions, your ideas, and your commitment to making this vision a reality going forward. I invite the panelists here to please stay momentarily, and thank you all for this lovely debate. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.